Hey friends, and welcome back to Movies I Watched This Week. There's 4 movies on the docket today. So grab a drink and get comfortable. I have a few things to say. 1, if you didn't read last week's blog, you should totally do that. 10 ways to take a fucking break. Okay, I was on vacation last week. I went to Florida. If you couldn't tell, I'm a little burnt. But I've been feeling like really overwhelmed, and that vacation was much needed. And it just made me clear my head and think about a lot of things that I want to do for Dry Gin Martini. So here we are. And then also this Monday I'm writing a full review of the Starling Girl, which is going to be in this video. We are going to talk about it, but I just have so many thoughts that I wanted to also write a review about it because I feel like I haven't done that in a while. I want to go see Final Destination tomorrow with my friend. Now let's get into the movies I watched this week. All right, enough housekeeping. Get on with it. Gin, gin. The first movie I watched was Revenge from 2017, directed by Coralie Forget. I just watched a YouTube video on how to pronounce that, so I hope I did it justice. And I rated it 3.54 stars. I can't choose, and as of late, watching so many movies and rating them, I can't rate movies. I can't rate them. I hate rating movies. I hate putting them on a numeric scale. If I can just, have this full disclosure moment, I hate doing that, because then I watch a movie again and I'm like, wait, completely different number. Like, I don't want to do that. Okay, so I gave it like a 3.54. Like, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I hate putting movies on a numeric scale. I would say this was a great movie, and let's get into why. So it stars Matilda Lutz as Jen, and I just want to say before we get into anything that her performance is fucking incredible, and I just really, really enjoyed this movie. I love the genre of a revenge film, specifically a female-led revenge film. They typically surround a woman who gets sexually assaulted, and then she goes and gets her revenge, her comeuppance, if you will. And that's exactly what Revenge is, but Revenge is so much more, because if I were to think of movies that are very similar to this, similar concept, similar plot, the first that came to mind were I Spit on Your Grave, and I watched that one, the 1970-something version, and that was just gross to me. I didn't like that movie. I felt like it still fit into this male fantasy of rape, and it was just so gruesome and violent, and she was naked the whole time. And though she did get revenge, it just felt like it was still sexualized and objectified, and I didn't like it. And then Promising Young Women, I really wanted to like that film, but I didn't, because I feel like she didn't get her justice. Like, she died in the end. Spoiler, she dies in the end, and I just felt like there was no justice. Like, and I get that that's kind of the point, because that's what happens is, like, most women, when they're sexually assaulted, they don't get that justice. Their abuser doesn't go to prison. Their rapist doesn't go to prison. You don't always get to murder your rapist. But I felt unsatisfied with that movie, because I think it was such a good concept, and it could have really made like a statement, and I feel like it didn't. That's just my opinion on the matter. But if I had 3 words to describe Revenge, it would be visceral, vibrant, and validating. Okay? So let's read the logline and get straight into my review for you guys. It is available on Tubi. Jen is enjoying a romantic getaway with her wealthy boyfriend until his 2 sleazy friends arrive for an unannounced hunting trip. As tension mounts in the house, the situation abruptly and viciously intensifies, culminating in a shocking act that leaves Jen brutalized and left for dead. Unfortunately for her assailant, she survives and soon begins a relentless quest for bloody revenge. So it's about 1 hour and 48 minutes and is rated R, okay? I just want to start by saying the costume design was absolutely impeccable. The pink star earring was such a brilliant choice. It's so vibrant, it stands out, and there's something inherently feminine and powerful about this one dangly earring that stays in throughout the entire movie. It's literally a hot pink star. And I thought that choice was so interesting, and I haven't seen something very bold like that in a horror movie in a while. And it reminded me of In Jennifer's Body, when Jennifer comes walking down the hall after she's been transformed into this succubus demon, and she's wearing the pink zip-up with the hearts on it, and it's just so feminine. And In Jennifer's Body, if you've never seen it, it's my favorite movie. Came out in 2009. Pink and stuff like that. But in this scenario, like, the choice of a bold pink earring was so good. So good. So, I thought it was visually stunning. The saturation and warmth of the film, I really liked. It just added this, like, fantastical element that already is happening in the film because Jen survives her attack, which we'll get to. But I just thought the cinematography and I thought the tracking shots and just the suspense and momentum of the film was such minimal dialogue. We follow Jen. The film stars, Jen is in this nice fancy house with her wealthy boyfriend, and it's very clear that he is married. I can't remember if he had children or not, but then his two scumbag, disgusting, sleazy, disgusting friends show up to the house and are basically enamored by Jen because she's absolutely beautiful. And so they're very creepy with her off the bat, and there's a scene that happens where she's dancing with them, and she's very clearly dancing in a seductive way to like seduce her boyfriend, if that makes sense. Like, she's dancing with Stan, who's the creepy, gross, disgusting man, and Richard is her boyfriend. So she's dancing kind of on Stan with Stan, but it's obviously directed at Richard. And that's something men would never understand. Anyway, so she's dancing with him, and then the next morning we wake up and she goes to have breakfast and Richard is gone, and it's just Stan and Dimitri, the two creepy friends. And immediately I was like, I am in danger. Jen, you're in danger. Everybody's in danger. Because now that the man who she's dating is gone, those two men have no loyalty to anybody, and obviously they're disgusting and vile, and Stan follows Jen into a room and rapes her. It's disgusting. It's a very long and disturbing scene. And what I found even more disturbing about it was that there's this part where Dimitri comes and like walks into the room, and Stan basically says either watch and or join or get out. Like, watch and join or get out. Don't just fucking stand there. And I don't know why in my mind I thought that maybe he would stop it or go get help, but of course he didn't. So he shut the door, and then he turned up the TV really loud so you couldn't hear her screams. And so it was just disgusting and very, very visceral. So then he comes back, Richard, her boyfriend, comes back to the house and finds out what went on. And at first I did think that he was going to like beat the shit out of the two guys, but no. So after that happens, Richard comes back, and then there's a whole scene where there's like this back and forth, and he's like yelling at the two guys for doing this to her, but also mad at her. And it's just this really like confusing, complex scene. And eventually she runs away because she realizes that they're all going like to kill her or attack her or basically send her on her way. And she really just wants to go home. And then she kind of realizes that's not going to happen. So she does run away. And as she's running, they're all chasing her, and they get to a cliff. And her choices there are to jump or God knows what. And Richard is like, okay, don't jump off the cliff. Don't jump off the cliff. Like, a helicopter is coming in 30 minutes. And it's like, I don't give a damn. Like, I want to go on the helicopter now. I'm afraid of you guys. You're like a terrifying group of people. And then they pushed her off, and she gets impaled and essentially dies. But then she comes back to life because of ants, like adrenaline or venom. I don't really know. I didn't really get that bit. But then we follow the rest of the film where she goes on this journey of like a phoenix rising from the ashes, literally and metaphorically depicted, where she goes and gets her revenge and brutally murders each and every one of these guys, which was so refreshing. It was so validating. It was so refreshing. She brutally murdered them all. She brutally murdered all of these stupid men. And it was amazing because they come back and they see that she's gone, and they realize that they have to go find her. But at the same time, she's already like gotten up, and there's just such this determination and strength of her literally rising from the ashes to go and kill these motherfuckers, rightfully so. And I just loved the sequence. I loved the action. There was such minimal dialogue that it really created this like fear and suspense of what was going to happen. I was fearing for my life that she was going to die. Spoiler alert, she kills everybody. She kills everybody. And the final sequence of the film, she kills Stan, she kills Dimitri. She's like covered in blood. Also, in the beginning of the film, her hair is blonde, and by the end of it, she's brunette, which I also thought was like a really beautiful transformation. Because in the beginning, she's like wearing all of these like skimpy clothes, and she's very sexy and just like appears to be what you would say like the male gaze. It's like this sexy dolled up young girlfriend when he's married. And then at the end, she's this badass with like brown hair, and she's wearing all of this like, it's still like tiny shorts and a tank top, but it was just so feminine and strong, the way that she was covered in blood and dirt, barefoot, limping, bleeding. She's all these open wounds, and she murders every single one of those losers. The final sequence of the film, it's very long, and it's so good, and the choreography is amazing. So Richard goes back to the house, he gets butt naked and decides, I'm gonna get in a shower because, you know, that's what he did. And then he's walking around, he gets out of the shower because he hears a noise. He shuts off the shower. So he's naked and soaking wet, immediately vulnerable, okay? And then he's walking around the house with the gun, and they're kind of in this like cat and mouse game because he thinks that she's there. She's not there yet. And then he sits down on the couch and the TV turns on, and he goes to turn off the TV and she's outside. And so then they like go at this cat and mouse game around the house. The house is literally a square. So they're running circles around each other. They both have guns and they're trying to murder one another. And she shoots him and like blows out half his stomach. And then the way that there's not only this vulnerability of a man being naked and hunted down, which we rarely, I think I've never seen that in a movie. Naked, wet, covered in blood, being chased, a man. And it's not in the way that when women are being chased, it's often like running in slow motion, or they're like soaking wet and they're wearing these clothes, where this was like he's running for his life because he knows he's in danger, and there was nothing like sexual about it, the way that female nudity in horror films is depicted and like sexual or sexualized, I should say. That much like nudity and weaponizing his nudity in a way that we so often see with women in cinema was so interesting to me, and I loved that choice. And so finally they like run into one another, and she slips on the blood because there are oodles and oodles and oodles of blood on the floor, okay? And she slips on it and falls, and he takes his gun and bashes her in the face. And then he picks her up and is strangling her against the wall. And one of the choices that I loved was that we see from her point of view, which is like the camera's point of view, where blood is coming down the lens, essentially like blood dripping down her face, and everything's muffled, you can't hear anything, and then it'll cut to him and it's completely clear. And I loved that back and forth, because the last line in the film is he's like mumbling to her, yelling at her, basically being like, oh my God, why do you have to fight back? And then the last line is, women always have to put up a fucking fight. And as he says that, she jams her hand into his wound and he falls to the ground. And she blows him to bits. And it was amazing. And I thought that line was such a good way to, like, such a great line to end the film, because then after that she walks outside and then you hear a helicopter and then the title card comes in. It's just so great. But I thought that line was so great because not only is it him being like, ugh, women always have to fucking fight back. Like, now I have to deal with you again. And I thought I already took care of you. But it's also the line of like, the whole point of the film, women always have to fight back. Because even in the presence of her boyfriend, somebody that she felt safe with, she wasn't. And then he couldn't even defend her in front of his two friends that raped and watched as she was raped, and then left her for dead, and she still got up. And even after surviving something like that, you don't get to just like move on and I don't know, continue living. You have to fight back. You have to fight every single day, because men are a threat to the existence of women. Not all men, but all women have a story. So Revenge, I rated it like 3.54, in the middle somewhere there. I really liked it, and I just love Coralie Fargette, and I loved The Substance, so I would love to see the rest of her work as well, and I highly suggest you watch this. It's partially in French, but to my people who don't like foreign movies or subtitles, I mean, you could watch this on silent and totally grasp what's going on, so that's that on Revenge. Okay, the next movies I watched were Smile and Smile 2, and we're going to talk about them together because I kind of just have like ongoing rambling thoughts between the two. They are both directed by Parker Finn. Smile came out in 2022 and Smile 2 came out in 2024. So a good amount of time for a sequel. You know, we weren't waiting like 12 years. And the first one follows Sosie Bacon, who plays Rose Carter, and my love, Kyle Gallner, who plays Cole. Let's read the log line. After witnessing a bizarre traumatic incident involving a patient, Dr. Rose Carter starts experiencing frightening occurrences that she can't explain. As an overwhelming terror begins taking over her life, Rose must confront her troubling past to survive and escape a horrifying new reality. I really liked this movie. I loved the concept of it. Basically, what happens is Rose is a doctor and she's in, I want to say, a psych facility, and this woman is talking to her that this thing has been following her around, and then she kills herself in front of Dr. Rose Carter. And so obviously that would traumatize anybody. And so then she goes through the rest of the film being not only traumatized by the events that she saw, but then she goes on to start seeing the same thing that the girl was telling her that she saw. So, I loved the progression and the pacing of the first movie. There were definitely a few times in both the first and second Smile that felt a little dragged out. The horror I'm used to is fast, so that's just like a subjective personal choice. But after watching both these movies, I kind of really like the pacing and suspense that happens because it is such a cerebral experience. So let's just get right into it. I'm assuming you saw it because I'm not going to get into the plot because, to be quite honest with you, I did a really bad job doing that with Revenge. What I found so interesting, and I was questioning myself the whole time, I was like, this is a metaphor or an allegory for trauma and depression, right? The idea that, like, there's no cure. You know, you can take medication, go to therapy, all these things, but trauma never really leaves you, and it kind of ebbs and flows when it comes into your life. And so the idea of someone being like, well, just smile, like, be happy, that doesn't really work. So I thought that was a really interesting approach and concept for the film, and then I looked it up, and that is the metaphor for the film. But it reminded me so much of It Follows, because It Follows terrified the shit out of me. I watched that in high school. And I watched it with my dad. Neither of us knew that it was a metaphor for STDs. Thankfully so. I Googled that on my own afterwards. The It Follows creatures were so tall and lengthy and lethargic and, like, wispy. Oh my god, it scared me. That essence of the film, it, like, scared me alone because you never knew when you were gonna see the creature. Like, the whole time I was kind of just like, oh, they're gonna show it now? Like, I'm a little nervous. So there was such an ability to build suspense and suspend reality in a way that was done really well. Because even though you can't see what's happening, all of the stuff that's going around and the people smiling and everything, it's still scary because you know the context behind it and you're kind of just waiting to see the thing. Which you do, thank God. Because imagine if you got to the end and then you never see it. That would be something that people would probably hate. I'd probably love it, honestly, because then I would just get to think about it all the time. But I'm really glad that they showed it at the end, and it was this muscly, disgusting, creepy creature. Yuck. I thought there were so many interesting elements of it, and then, of course, you have Kyle Gallner, who plays, like, the hot cop, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. I just really liked it. And I thought the ending was so good because, spoiler alert, she dies. The final act of the film was brilliant. I love when there's not a final girl or, like, a final person in a horror movie, and it kind of just, like, puts an end cap on it. But obviously there's a Smile too, so we reopen that can of worms. However, the way it's done, it kind of, like, passes the torch on for the next movie without having to continue the thread of, like, a final girl from the first movie. Because sometimes they do that in horror and then they, like, forget about it. I think of Final Destination. In the first movie, they bring back Ali Lauder to the second movie, and then she's not in the rest of them, so they kind of, like, take away the thread. So I liked how this passed the torch, quite literally, because she sets herself on fire in front of Kyle Gallner. Sets herself on fire and kills herself. So then he obviously gets passed on to it. So in my mind, I was hoping that the second movie would follow Kyle Gallner. It doesn't, obviously. It follows Sky Riley, pop star played by Naomi Scott. So let's get right into that one as well, because I kind of want to talk about them in tandem. So Naomi Scott plays Sky Riley. And the way the film starts is we have Kyle Gallner, and he's walking up to this house. And then you can see that he's still having the visions of Dr. Rose Cotter. He sees her setting herself on fire. So we're reminded, we pick up right where we left off, essentially. I mean, some time has passed, but we pick up right where we left off, where he is about to, like, see the creature and kill himself. So he's trying to pass it on to somebody else. Because in order to pass it on to somebody else, you have to kill somebody. Yes. So he goes to this random drug house, and he goes inside, and he's like, I'm going to kill your brother in front of you so I can pass it on. But then there's another guy in the house, so it doesn't end up working out, and that guy is Lucas Gage, who plays Lewis. I am a Lucas Gage stan. I've been watching him since Tagged. I think I've said that in 3 videos. Like, I will watch him in anything because he's so good, and I love him. So Lucas Gage ends up getting it, but first, Kyle Gallner, like, sees him and is like, I'm so sorry, bro. This wasn't supposed to happen. And then he runs out of the house, and then there's a car accident that happens. And then we pick up, and we're with Naomi Scott as Sky Riley, the pop star, and I couldn't help but think that she reminded me of Demi Lovato. Thoughts? She reminded me of Demi Lovato. And so we find out that she was in a car accident a year prior with her boyfriend, played by Ray Nicholson, one of my crushes. They get in a car accident. She used to abuse drugs, and now she's sober, and now she's dealing with all of that. So her trauma is dealing with the fact that her boyfriend died in that car, and she watched him die, and she's also a recovering addict. So there's all of that trauma happening. And then she goes to Lucas Cage's house, and he kills himself in front of her. So she gets passed on the smile monster. So all of that trauma is happening as well. What was different about this film, I did feel like it was a little too long and that it dragged out a little too much. Especially because after seeing the first one and knowing the concept and knowing that you're not going to see the creature or like the cause of her trauma and fear till the end of the film, there were moments where I was like, that felt like a little bit long. But that was just a personal thing. It didn't like take away from the movie as a whole. There were times where I was sitting there kind of like, I loved that she was a pop star though. I loved the idea of a celebrity, and kind of like something that I wrote in my notes, I hope this makes sense, was like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like they literally have the same formula for the first and second movie, which they often do in horror sequels and stuff like that. But it really was just like they passed it on, and then now we're dealing with Sky Riley's trauma. Hers being so different because it was like her boyfriend died in front of her. She's also coping with her friend killing himself in front of her, and now also being in recovery because she used to be addicted to drugs. So like all of that's happening, and then she's a public figure and has to deal with that as well, and the constant scrutiny. So I loved that societal commentary because I think people are way too parasocial now, especially when it comes to judging people's lives and choices based on the fraction of what you see on the internet. And to have her and her boyfriend in this car accident, they were both famous. It's like all of that's put on a pedestal. And so when she's suffering and dealing with that trauma and like having these breakdowns, people are, instead of being understanding, they immediately judge her. And then years later, people will be like, why do we treat her that way? And we've seen that with Britney Spears, and we've seen that with so many people over time. And you don't realize until it's too late, unfortunately. Yeah, I just really liked that there was a celebrity at the helm, and I thought the final sequence of this film was really good. It all starts when she goes on stage to like accept that award and kind of has a breakdown, and nobody helps her off the stage. Nobody's like, okay, let's go. Everybody just watches her, and that's the thing. That's something that's very similar in both these movies, is like you watch people suffer and you'll judge them or make comments about it or be like, oh, they should get help. And then they do get help and you're like, oh, that's weird. Both of these girls in both the films, and I love that they were both led by women, are struggling. They had severe traumatic experiences, and what you're just supposed to like get over it, that shit doesn't go away. And that's kind of just the overarching theme here. So in the first one, we have a doctor, which also I really like that because I can't imagine being a doctor. Come into ya. Nurses, I have friends that are nurses, and the stories they tell me, oh my God, absolutely not. So yeah, there's a lot of trauma that comes in that. And then you have generational trauma from her family as well. And then you have a celebrity. So these are two very polarizing like careers where you think of them as like, wow, they make a lot of money and that seems like a good life. But there are a lot of cons that come with those pros, and it's just all of these things went through my mind. Those are my thoughts on Smile. Like, I liked both of them. Is there gonna be a third one? Because I would like to see where that goes next, because it literally ends with her giving the smile demon to every single person in the stadium because she kills herself on the stage at a stadium tour by smashing her face in with a microphone. Okay, the last and final movie I watched this week, which also will be receiving a written review from me, is The Starling Girl 2023. I rented this. 17-year-old Gem Starling struggles with her place in her Christian fundamentalist community, but everything changes when her magnetic youth pastor Owen returns to the church. So, this stars Eliza Scanlon, who is absolutely fucking incredible in Sharp Objects as well, and many other things. And Crush of the Week, Lewis Pullman. Yup. Is that why I watched it? Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay. It's okay to watch movies because there's a hot person in it. Why do you think I love Jennifer's Body? Hello? I loved this movie. I really did. I also hated this movie because it made me really angry. But I think that was the whole point. So let's get into it. I have so many notes because I took notes while I was watching it instead of afterwards. So let's just kind of run through them because, like I said, there's going to be a written review which you can read where I will go like in depth with like cinematography, mise-en-scène, and thoughts like that. So this is kind of just going to be rambling. Okay? First thing I wrote, the disturbingly true depiction of grooming in The Starling Girl. So the film follows Gem. Gem is this 17-year-old girl. but it's very obvious that her age is higher than her maturity level because she grew up in this fundamental Christian church where you're instilled these values of what a woman should be and what her purpose is in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the church. And that is to basically be a mother and a wife. You are a vessel for marriage and children. That's kind of your place, you know? So the depiction and the nuance of the relationship that happens between Owen and Jem is so interesting to me because of the psychology behind what's going on. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So the film starts off with her in like a dance group performing for the church, and she's wearing all white, and a woman comes up to her and her mother and is basically like, I just want to let you know that we can see your bra. And I just wanted to tell you that because it's not appropriate. And we know that you're not like that. So we just wanted you to cover up and not be embarrassed. Right away, I knew where this film was going. I was like, this is not just a fundamentalist church. This is like a cult in a way, because you can't even exist in your own body without it being perceived as sexual and threatening to men because they can't control themselves, and your job as a woman is to be demure and docile and basically just like an accessory to these men, and these women are taught that their whole life. So how can you blame them for not thinking any differently? And it's like not their fault, but at the same time you're like, I wish you would wake up. Oh my God, there's so many things going on here. So I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. The bra thing, like, she is about to get brainwashed. She's already kind of brainwashed. This film does a beautiful job talking about the psychology of young women and wanting the desire and attention of older men. So let me break that down a little bit. I remember when I was a little girl and I would be in a McDonald's or at a dance class or at a park, and I would be like 6 or 7. I mean, this is like elementary to middle school, and you would just see older boys. And there was this trend on TikTok like a week ago or so too, where it was like what I looked like when I thought my older brother's best friend had a crush on me. Like, I remember, because as a young woman, you're kind of like trained, especially in like American culture, Western culture, to be desirable, be quiet, be approachable, you know, sit with your legs crossed, be polite. You're taught things that young boys are not taught. And one of those things is kind of like that your beauty is what makes you desirable. And maybe your femininity and like your daintiness is what makes you desirable. So there's this aspect of like young girls who want an older man. You also have to think about constantly being told, oh, boys your age are so immature, like you should go for an older man. But then you have older men going for young women, and there's this whole thing of like pedophilia, but also like these societal things that we just kind of accept. I hope this is making sense because I'm really just rambling, and I hope we're on the same page if anybody's even here. I wrote the dad in a way kind of looked like Owen, the youth pastor, and I found that interesting as well, and the psychology behind like young women wanting the approval of their fathers so bad. And I just thought there were so many interesting things about this film that we could get into for hours and hours and hours. It's like that I wrote down with this movie were control, ownership, and worship. And I think all three of those words can be very prevalent in certain fundamentalist Christian communities as well, because the sense of control, which is that there is a higher power, or in this instance, like men who have control over your livelihood, your autonomy, your choices. Because one of the things that happens in this film is Jem is being courted by Owen's younger brother, and they have to get permission from the father to court her and approach her and date her, essentially because she's getting to the age where she should be considering marriage and children, and she's 17. So the idea of, I have an ownership and control over you, that I get to decide who you're going to be with and have children with and live with. But at the same time, growing up and being a part of this community, you wouldn't think anything of it. You're like, well, that's what my duty is. That's what happens next in my life. We're like growing up, you know, where I'm from, it's like you go to school, you go to college, you meet your partner, you have children, and they do the same thing. And it's kind of that like, you know, rat race cycle. And breaking that ideology, or being like, you can do something different, it's hard. So imagine that when it comes to your faith and your worship and your prayer, and the idea that there is literally a higher power, that everything you do, he has the choice of letting you into the gates of heaven or sending you to hell. If you ever sin or disobey, you go to hell, and you have to pray on it. But yet we excuse so many sins that are happening around us because we're too afraid essentially to speak up on those things. There's no self-trust because your prayers and things, like, you believe that when you pray it's because God called on you to speak to him, or you believe a sin is because the devil like entered you and you were weak enough to allow the devil into you to commit a sin. So there's also this like no self-trust and self-confidence in your actions. So we never even got to the plot, which is Jem starts having a crush on Owen, her youth pastor, who is married and significantly older than her. And then he starts to get very comfortable with her and takes advantage of her innocence and vulnerability, and essentially like takes her crush and takes advantage of it and uses it and creates this relationship with her where he kisses her, takes her virginity, and gets in her mind that she's the only person that understands him and he needs to run away with her. And then they get caught and her parents immediately blame her for, being a sinner and doing these awful things. But at the same time, the mom, which I was really glad, stuck up for her daughter in the sense that she was like, well, your son knew what he was doing when he approached my significantly younger daughter. And then the film ends with her running away with him. And then they're in a hotel together and she takes the car and she leaves him and goes to this bar that her father told her about. Because at the same time, her father is struggling heavily with addiction. And so you're having his poor behavior. She keeps coming home late because she's sneaking out to see Owen. And then she sees her dad in this like drunken stupor in the backyard. And he's very obviously struggling. And rather than accepting that he's an addict and struggling and trying to help him, they're like, oh, he's weak. This isn't what God would want. He's a sinner, blah, blah, blah. So we're excusing his like verbal abuse and control and abuse of power and alcoholism, but we can't excuse this young girl's innocence and idea that like it's not that crazy that she would genuinely believe what Owen is telling her about their future and how they're meant to be together and all of these things. There's a scene where Louis Pullman, pierces Jem's ears. She's not allowed to have ear piercings, and he pierces her ears. And I thought this was such an interesting yet perfect depiction of that abuse of power and like grooming. Because not only is he her youth pastor, he's the pastor's son and the brother of the girl that she's supposed to be courting. Okay, so like he's aware of her family and the way in which their family runs, etc. So to know the mother is kind of like the head of the house, even though the father technically is the head of the house, she's the one that does everything. And she's very stern and she's kind of scary. And so for him to understand that the mom was like, you can't have your ears pierced, and then do it and only do the one, it was like such a gross abuse of power in my mind. Like, he's fully taking ownership of her body and being like, well, it's okay, you're with me, like, we can do this. If this is something that you want, like, it doesn't matter what your parents think. It doesn't matter what, like, God would want. It just, like, it felt so different than a kiss scene or them touching inappropriately or, like, him physically taking advantage of her, which he does later in the film. Like, the ear piercing to me was just such a vulnerable and intimate thing. I'm sorry I got lost in it is a line that Owen says in the car after he takes her virginity, referring to her innocence. And I found that vile and disgusting. I mean, yeah, in response to being asked if he felt guilty about it. So, like, they're sitting in the backseat and there's a line or, like, something about you're so innocent. And then he says, I'm sorry I got lost in it. And she says, like, do you feel guilty? And he goes, I mean, yeah. And just kind of, like, shrugs it off. But it's, like, I don't know if it's, like, the Western ideology or, like, the culture around virginity and purity that, like, makes me think virginity is a big deal when really it's not, but it can be depending on if you believe that or not. So to just have somebody take that from you and then throw it away, like, whatever, like, it happened, it just again really asserts that power dynamic and, like, shows just truly how fucked up what he did was. And, like, he's so bitter about his own failed relationship with his wife that he's willing to manipulate and ruin this young girl's idea of a relationship in order to rebuild a fairy tale that he can't produce with his wife. It's, like, very clear that he's taking all the things he doesn't like about his wife and heightening that with Jem. He compliments her on certain things that he doesn't receive from his wife, where he's just like, nobody gets me. Oh, I'm married, but my wife doesn't even understand me. You get me, though. You're so special. You're a child. You're my student. Like, so she inherently has this respect for him. And then also to throw in the layer of God, she inherently has the respect for a youth pastor who's like one of her direct, voices to God. So there's not only just like the age, there's the power imbalance of him being her teacher, but then you have the religion on top of that gives her all of these predisposed notions of a man and his power in relation to God and how you are to serve them and be desired by them and have their children and be their wives. And when her mother finds out about their relationship and she finds out that they had sex together, she says, "You're ruined." So to have raised a child, raising young women specifically, and instilling in their mind that their value comes from their bodies and ability to reproduce is sick on its own. Because women are so much more than that, obviously, duh. But in the scope of religion here, you're raising these women and teaching them that their value comes from their ability to reproduce and be a wife and be feminine and be at home and, create this traditional gender role, whatever. And then she does that thing that you have kind of instilled in her, like sex is the thing to reproduce and have children, but it can only be done within these certain constraints and certain boundaries. I rated the movie 4 stars, but as I'm thinking about it in this moment, I'm like rating it 4.5 because I still have so many thoughts and questions. It really is a very, I would say, like, if I could paint a brush over the movie, it would be like a soft and feminine brush. It was very like white, and there's like so much symbolism of like the purity ring and wearing white and the dancing and not being able to dance in a certain way because it's deemed inappropriate, and just not being able to fully express yourself because of God, when the real teaching of God would be that he would want you to live your fullest, truest, honest self. No, there might not. So I don't want to get into religion. I don't want to talk about religion. We just talked about it so much. Anyway, I loved that film. I thought it was amazing, and I wrote a review about it that's going up today on my Substack and website, dryginmartini.com, that you can totally go read. I really think you should watch that movie. I've been left befuddled. I've been left speechless in a way, even though I just didn't shut the fuck up. Okay. Those are the movies I watched this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. It was a lot of rambling. I'm not gonna lie. And I'm not sorry about it. Okay? Those were my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. This reminds me of like the Voss water bottle in Smile 2. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, stay flirty, stay thirsty, and stay watching movies. Watch more movies together. Make more movies together. See you soon. Chin chin.